Okay, welcome everybody to our afternoon breakout, Yell Less, Incentivize More. I'm going to make sure that I stop sharing this for a moment. Want to spend just a few moments talking about guidelines for our breakout today. Please mute your mic. We have a chat mod that'll be collecting questions in chat. If you have something that you would like to add, we will have that person grab those and weave those in. You can also raise your hand if there's something you'd like for us to bring you in for, but typing them in chat is sort of our preferred method to get through stuff. We're going to have a big chunk of time at the end to bring in your questions, bring in your thoughts. We want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to talk. So my name's Sandor. I am part of the council team for camp support. I also run a camp called Hoopla. And this is one in a series of financial breakouts that we've tried to do over the last few years. I've got a great panel here with us today that I want to allow each one to spend a moment and talk about themselves, talk about their camp. Why don't we start with you, Caveman? Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, hey everyone, I'm Caveman, also Josh. I've been coming to Burning Man since 2012. And from around 2013, 2014, my kind of close group of friends and I started organizing our own camp. And what started just as a kind of group of friends kind of expanded out. Now, these days, we're called Coco Disco. There's going to be about 50 of us on Playa this year. And we bring in thousands of fresh coconuts every year and throw a big fresh coconut pina colada and disco party one afternoon, usually on a Thursday afternoon, which everyone should come to. And I live in San Francisco, British, as you can hear. First time I went to Burning Man, I actually flew from the UK. And if you hear some grunts when I'm speaking, it's because I do have my 4.5-week-old baby on my lap as well.
This is our secret weapon for having people. We're just going to put the baby up there for an hour.
Anytime it gets stressful, I'll just lift her up.
G-Turtle, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, buddy. G-Turtle or Galway. I first burn was in 2002, and in 2009, me and a couple of friends started Camp Sakatumi, and we served chilled sake under a shade structure, flavored sake on bamboo trays and crafts in sake cups. We wear headbands on, and we also serve street side. This year will be the 10th burn for Sakatumi and will be my 15th.
Great. Thank you for joining us. Whiskey Jackal, tell us a little bit about you, your camp.
Hey, everybody. I'm Whiskey Jackal or Phil. I first came to Burning Man in 2016, went in 2017, took a break in 18, and in 19 got together with some friends. We created an interactive art space called Doggenheim Gallery. It's a 24/7 interactive space where people can come get away from the party, chill, create artwork on canvas walls, on different mixed media that we have. And we pour, equally appealing non-alcoholic beverages and cold beer whenever campers are around. So we have this really great interactive space. We've got about 20-ish campers who camp with us. So we're a pretty small camp and we'd like to keep it that way.
Welcome.
Thanks.
In terms of agenda for today, I'm going to share a short presentation that I've put together on sort of this topic of financial incentives. And then we are going to weave in our panelists for some more discussion, and then we're going to weave in your questions. So let me share this screen and we'll go through this. So again, the idea of this panel is yell less, incentivize more, the pros and cons of dues, deposits, and other financial structures to help motivate your camp. And you'll see that as we go on, we'll weave in some non-financial things as well. So we've had our panel all introduce themselves. I also want to recognize D-Rex, who she's in the bottom right-hand corner here. She is our chat mod, and she will be scanning the chat for questions and things that you want to get the panel to answer. As I mentioned earlier, this is the fourth Camp Symposium breakout that I've done, all in sort of the camp finances arena. So in 2021, kind of in the middle of the pandemic, we talked about managing uncertainty. That had some dues and deposits content in it. We don't have the 2021 breakouts up yet on YouTube, but they are supposed to be going up in the next couple of weeks to the next month or two. And then last year, the two breakouts that I did on finances are up there and are available for you to watch. One was on keeping your camp in the black. And then the second one was on forming a 501c3 nonprofit for fun and nonprofit. So if you are really interested in these finance topics, there is other content out there for you to go and take a look at. I have added some QSR codes here so that if you're having trouble finding any of this stuff, you can just hold your phone up to it and get that link. So financial incentives, why do we care? Why are we doing this panel? So the picture that you see here, this is Tuesday after Exodus. We all heard DA talk in the plenary about how late people were on the playa this year. Well, here is photo evidence. You can see just how many camps after Exodus had not gotten off the playa yet. It's the latest, I believe, camps had been out there ever. And I had the benefit of being on camp support of looking through the post playa feedback that you guys provide. And one of the main reasons that people were on playa so late were people bailing on strike. So whether it was COVID, whether it was dust, whether it was wind, that's the origin of this panel, is thinking about, well, how do we provide some tools to help people manage this that you see in front of you in this photo. And I put a quote from DA in his Burning Man Journal article that came out last night. Many camps and projects had trouble striking infrastructure and line sweeping. Early departures were a big culprit. So my background is Wall Street. It's consulting. I used to work for a firm called McKinsey. And I am borrowing something, a rubric, a model from McKinsey to help us think through these financial incentives. And yes, it's from the for-profit world, but McKinsey also does work for nonprofits, and this article applies for both. If you want to read the article, there's a QSR code on the bottom right, and that will pull it up. You can take a look. So this article was from January of 2022. It's entitled "The Powerful Role Financial Incentives Can Play in Transformation." And again, the transformation that we're most interested in right now is getting people off playa. And this was sort of the big takeaway. Generous and specific financial incentives can help drive and sustain a rapid performance improvement. And there were 7 principles that they identified that help you think through incentives, financial incentives in particular. And I'll just quickly hit those before we actually apply these in a couple of examples. So the first thing they recommend is that you tie incentives, financial incentives, directly to the transformation outcomes that you would like to see. In the case of strike, you want to be financially incentivizing people to stay for strike. You want to encourage outperformance rather than just good performance. So what does it mean to help with strike? Well, some people are just there wandering around like zombies because, they had a big night the night before. And some people are really your superstars that are really helping get that strike done. And is there a way that you can think about differentiating those two and how you reward them? The third one is using incentives to encourage broad participation. And the context of what we're talking about is basically, can you get your whole camp incentivized, not just a couple of people? The fourth thing that they have is keeping your incentives simple. So is it easy to understand? Does everyone understand what's happening? Or is it just so complicated no one understands what it means or how it works? So they're not incentivized by it. The fifth item is including metrics beyond just the main focus. So strike is one thing that you can incentivize, but there are a lot of things during the week that help it strike that that you might think about incentivizing as well. Maybe some things like cleaning up your camp as you go, or putting things back in your truck or your storage container as you go. So there is work being done throughout the week, not unlike DA talking about moving your camp during the week and not just at the very end. The sixth item was, making sure your financial incentive payouts happen as quickly as possible when you get back. That's very simple. If you have some sort of incentive, pay it quickly. Don't let people, don't make people wait. But then the seventh item, and this is probably most important for us, it's tailoring these financial incentives to strategy and culture. In our case, we have a very, very strong culture, and we have, just flipping to the next slide, we've had a big problem as a community around the idea of weaving money and financial incentives into how we run camps. So another article, another page actually from the Burning Man website, and there's a QSR code here in the bottom right. Again, you can pull that up and take a look. There is a really great page, a great discussion on the Burning Man website that gives us a lot of guidance about how Burning Man and the cultural direction setting folks think that we should think about these topics. It's kind of hard to find. So that's why I wanted to talk about it here and wanted to put this QSR code here so that you can find it. And I'm going to quickly hit the key takeaways. The ideas that they wanted to convey to us is that everybody should participate materially in the work as well as the play. So in this case, with respect to strike, you love as many people participating in strike as possible. Money should not be substituted for work. That's basically a concept they call pay-ticipation. You don't want people saying, hey, here's $1,000, I'm not doing strike. That's something that we want to try to avoid. We are specifically forbidden, and not just by culturally, but by the way our permits work with the BLM, from paying people to work on playa unless you go and get their very special permit, which most camps don't do. So a situation where you're paying people to do stuff on playa, not allowed. They tell us on this page, it is okay to pay people pre and post playa for things, but you have to really be careful about the cultural considerations. And there's a lot of discussion about gifting versus a transaction. And the idea is that a gift is made without the expectation of getting something back. A transaction is where there's a quid pro quo. And then the second to last bullet here, camp dues shouldn't have a profit element to it. Nothing financially you do in your camp should have a profit element to it. There should be no one sort of making money and then going off and helping pay their mortgage with it. It's designed to cover costs in your camp and dividing those up. And there shouldn't be money in excess of that. And then finally, and this is maybe the one thing that I was most surprised about, and I know most people don't know about, they talked about it being okay culturally to reduce dues or financial commitments to your camp to say thank you for people who go above and beyond participation-wise. Again, you want to be mindful of, is it a gift versus a transaction? So if somebody does something really great and then you reward them by reducing their dues, ideally they weren't expecting that. And that it wasn't like, hey, if you do this, the camp's going to do this. That's a transaction. But it's the idea of, can you reward people for going above and beyond? And so let's do a simple example. And I'm going to use strike deposits. Strike deposits are a somewhat common idea out in our universe of camps. And I've just sort of concocted a very simple application of that. And that's here that, let's say we have a camp that everyone in the camp pays a $200 strike deposit. And to get this deposit back, you're going to have to stay until the very end of strike, including the line sweeps. And anything that's forfeited goes to help pay camp expenses. So there's not going to be a profit it goes back and pays for things that were expenses that we're sharing. And so we have these 7 principles that McKinsey provided us with. Let's just quickly look and see, how good does it match up with what they suggest that we do? 1, are we tying this incentive directly to what we want people to do? Yes. We want people to stay for strike. We have a deposit that's tied directly to strike. Green check mark. Are we encouraging outperformance rather than good performance, right? So do we have any gradations? If somebody really kills it at strike, are we doing anything special for them? Are we rewarding them in any way? No. It's sort of a binary thing. So in this case, we sort of fail that idea. That's an area where if we were thoughtful about this, we might could improve it. The third element is, are we using the incentive to encourage the whole camp? Yes, we are. We're getting everybody involved in this incentive. The fourth element, is it simple? Very simple. Stay for strike, get this deposit, right? That's about as simple as it can be. The fifth element, are we including opportunities to expand beyond just this narrow idea of strike so that people can stretch? No, it's very simple. It's just sort of strike, this sort of limited thing. We're not talking about doing stuff during the week to help with strike or driving the truck back or putting the container away in Reno or any of that sort of stuff. It's just strike. So that's an area for improvement. The next item, are we going to pay it out immediately when we get back? I'm assuming that we are, so that people quickly get the reward of this financial incentive. And then the last thing, this is where we have to be really careful, right? How does this tie in with Burning Man's strategy and culture, right? The caution is, if you set a deposit like this too low, let's say instead of $200, it's $10, right? It's just a nuisance, right? People can very easily just say, you know what, keep my $10. I'm going to go back to Reno. I'm tired. And if that happens, you've drifted into participation. And so when you think through something like this, you really have to understand your camp and your demographic, your people, and know what the dangers are with respect to these things. So is $10 the right amount? Is it $200? Is it $500? Is it $1,000? You know your people, but be aware that if you set something like this too low, people just walk it. Now, there are other things that you can do to help with that, and we're going to talk about those with our panelists in just a minute. But I wanted to give people a simple example of how you can apply these principles to think about whatever idea you have to financially incentivize folks. Let's do one more example, a little bit more complicated. All right, now we're going to have a dues honorarium program, right? So if you remember, and I'm going to back up for a second, one of the big takeaways down here at the bottom was reducing dues is okay under the right circumstances. So let's say, all right, we're going to try to do this, right? Let's think through how this applies. So in our example here, as part of everyone's contribution to camp, we're going to have people pay $300 in dues. And you have to either work build or strike, and you have to work some number of hours on playa, let's say in whatever interactivity you have or whatever teams you have. And I don't know what that number is. Let's just make something up. Let's say it's 10 hours or 20 hours or some number that you have in your head that you have to do during the week. People have the opportunity to gift more time beyond that number, but they're doing so without the expectation of the reward. And what you might say is, hey, if the camp has leftover money, we're going to return that to the people who put in the extra effort, but it's not a guarantee. Your gift of your time has no certain return. Let's take a look at that idea using our sort of 7 elements of our framework. First, are we tying our incentive directly to the behavior that we want? Yes. So depending on what you sort of allow to count against those hours, and you got work or you got build or strike in the mix, yes, that's tied to the outcome that we would like here. We want to get the work done, right? Does it encourage outperformance rather than just good performance? I would say yes. Depends on how you give credit against those hours, but it gives people an opportunity not just to do a thing, but do a thing or go above and beyond. The third element, Are we making it broad enough that the whole camp can participate? Yes. Have we kept the design simple? Well, we definitely sacrifice some simplicity over just the strike deposit. And this is something you have to think about. What's too complicated, right? If there are 100 things and someone's got to keep track of all these hours and it's a mess, you sort of defeated the purpose of a financial incentive that's going to motivate people. But it's something that you want to sort of keep in your mind as you design something like this. The fifth element, do we have ways to sort of exceed sort of the basic elements? Yes, people can go above and beyond. They can do a lot of different things. It depends on how many things you sort of count against those hours. And then the next element, are payouts made quickly? It's up to you. Let's assume so. And then the last element, how do we mesh with Burning Man culture? Again, this is another area of caution. So this idea of not guaranteeing the reward is important, right? That sort of is the dividing line between a gift and a transaction. And so we were careful in the way that we designed this to make sure that people understood there's a possibility perhaps, but it's not guaranteed. And so you're not doing something with the expectation that Y, if you do X, Y is going to occur. So those are just two examples of possible financial incentives and a rubric, a way of thinking through those. There are as many different examples as you can think of. And we have a Discord that we announced during the plenary. This is the Burner Network Discord. It's a lot of TCOs and camps. We encourage you to join and hop in the camp discussion channel and put your ideas out there and we'll discuss them. We'll use these sort of 7 framework elements or other things that you think we might need to weave in, but let's have a discussion. This is a very poorly understood area in the broader sort of camp universe, and let's talk it through. So that's my spiel. There are a bunch of other things that can kind of go into this to make it stronger, and I want to bring our panel into our discussion now. If you look here at this slide, there's a lot of other things that you can supplement or that go nicely along with financial incentives to make them stronger that are outside this McKinsey framework that we came with. So I am going to stop sharing my slides. We've got our panel back up here. And what I'd like to do, let's start with each one of you. Just describe a little bit about how you handle strike and motivating people to stay for strike, and whether it's financial or otherwise. And maybe Caveman, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, this has been a journey of many years, and we're still iterating on this every year as to how to do it in the best way. Like for many people, last year was pretty brutal. That we had a big interactive art exhibit and on top of our normal camp, and there was a number of people who left early, and some people who just like slept through it. And so there was a core group of us just grueling away in the 100-degree heat and dust storm to get it all done. We have tried to do financial incentives in the past and have struggled with it for some of the reasons that you've mentioned. One was just really wanting to avoid the kind of participation, right? And the fact that some people may just choose to bank it and walk away. And our camp certainly does have some pretty large variance in kind of income groups, which makes it hard to kind of choose a number that feels like fair for everyone, and will incentivize the right behavior. We've also struggled with, where do we draw the line? What counts, right? If someone's there, but they've slept through half of it and they turn up at the end and do some moop sweeping, if they stayed for strike versus someone who like worked their ass off for 8 hours, but then left before the end, so we've kind of struggled with those. And I know in our pre-call, you talked about having more rigorous kind of structure for strike, which I really liked. This year, we are doing a few things. First of all, and we've done this the last couple of years, we actually do the bulk of our camp strike on Saturday. All our interactivity is done by then, and there are people who stay past temple burn, but like they just, they keep their tents or shift boards or RVs or whatever up and running. But the bulk of the camp strike gets done on Saturday, which helps a lot. We set the general expectation that everyone has to stay for strike. And that's just like the rules. And if someone, there can be exceptions if like it's planned in advance and someone's doing a lot of other work for the camp, but otherwise people have to stay for strike. And we put strong social pressure. If someone just doesn't turn up, then the likelihood is that we're not going to invite them back to camp with us the year after. Again, can always be like small exceptions, but that's like we stick to that pretty strongly. If someone's not, pulling their weight, then they shouldn't be camping with us in the end, because that's not what's burning.
And someone had asked in
Burning Man
chat, is that the death penalty? Yes, that's the
Yes,
death
that's the death penalty. Yeah, exactly. This year we are taking some inspiration from yourself, really trying to put more structure around strike in terms of, having shifts, having more organization of exactly who's going to be doing what when, so that there can be more accountability, but also so that there can be more of a feeling of fairness. I think that's the other thing that we've struggled with in the past and camps have struggled with. You may have someone who has put months and months of work and was there like a week early building and was doing tons of work throughout the week. And then they're kind of spent by strike and maybe they don't do as much. And there are other people who turned up late, didn't really do months of prep. They were there working away at strike and they're being annoyed at the person who like has left early, right? And it's like, well, so trying to figure out how you can recognize the different work that people in and are putting in, and the fact that some people do more in build, some people do more in strike. That's something we're trying to address, just so there's that feeling of fairness, which I think is important as well.
Thank you. G Turtle, how do you guys handle getting folks for strike and keeping them there and sort of navigating this idea?
Right. So one thing I didn't mention before is the size of our camp. We have averaged in recent years around like 15 to 20. This year, we're expecting 20 to 25. So keeping those numbers in mind, essentially, so we've built our camp around core members and leaders. So new camp participants, they're not random, and they're usually connected to core camp members. And so we utilize them as sort of their sponsors, right? So as sponsors, they're responsible for the acculturation and accountability for their participation. And we also set up clear and simple camp structure and rules. So in that we set the expectations, what the commitments are, and we also create a contract of understanding that they have to sign, and as well as we make sure the rules and the structure is simple and transparent, but also flexible, right? So same thing that Caveman mentioned, you want to be flexible. One, there's things you can't control, right? And some campmates might, at the last minute, they have to be home earlier than they originally planned, and so forth. So being transparent and having those trade-off of commitments. So, if people are there for like load in and setup, but they can't be there for load out, or breakdown, right? Load out is like when we're loading stuff in and out of storage, essentially. And so if somebody is not going to be there for a loadout, they'll just emphasize more responsibilities in the line sweeps throughout the week, and then of course at the end of the week. So yeah, be flexible with the trade-offs, but essentially we start with the assumption that you're there for all those commitments, and then we lead and make major camp decisions by consensus, but within the core camp members, right? So so again, you have the core camp members that are sort of the sponsors, but the decisions are being made by those people that are responsible for other people that are participating. And then ensure there's mutual understanding and appreciation that the camp participation and interactivity are in itself are the real incentives, right? There is commitments, financial commitments that are understood, but it's not done in deposit. And we let them know ahead of time what to expect, while also being flexible, right? We need people to be able to commit to the time, and we kind of lay out in that camp contract what the commitments are, what the time frame is, and then what the financial commitments are as well.
Oops.
It's like
Sandor,
you're
muted.
Yep, you're muted, Sandor.
There we go. So we got a question in chat from Colin. G-Troll, do you guys have a strike deposit, or is it a contract, or how do you sort of think through that?
Yeah, we don't have a deposit. The contract is, it is a commitment to understanding, the acculturation, the participation, what the time commitment is, and there is the financial commitment is, it's paying for the sake, it's paying for shared storage costs, and as well as transporting the main camp stuff. So we have a box truck, gas that's shared, for the generator between the whole camp. So that's the financial commitment, and yeah, we don't do deposits.
Got it. Thank you. Whiskey Jackal, how do you guys handle strike and making sure that you have enough people for strike?
Yeah, we handle strike purely through acculturation, right? We basically beat the 10 principles into newcomers when they start coming. Leave no trace is a big part of that. We want everyone to be living the core values who are out there. We do not use a strike deposit or anything like that. We actually have about, out of 20 people, we've got people coming in from 4 different countries. We have 3 or 4 people on low income tickets. We don't feel like it's really good incentivization. And right now our budget is so low that we basically have an expected budget of like $300 per person for dues. And we try to work within that. Hopefully it's less. And then at the end of the day, we actually just go ahead and have a suggested donation to cover. The people who lead the camp have kind of gotten together and said, this is really important to us. We want to keep bringing new people out here, getting them to understand the burn. And one of the things that ties my camp together is we're all a bunch of furries from all over the world. So there is actually, yeah, right. So there's a really good social contract and lots of social pressure that we utilize, because we don't want finances to be a reason that someone can't come, and we're trying to get the right people out who will participate and be a part of the community and not just spectate the event. So it's really a lot of that social pressure on our end, and it's worked out great so far this year. The past couple of years, we've been busy building up the camp and figuring out like what to do to add to our infrastructure. And I think our costs are going to be down significantly this year. I mean, basically, we're just buying art supplies and beer, coffee, that kind of stuff. So no real need for financial incentives if you just beat that acculturation in and get the right people in.
Right.
Can I ask Whiskey
add
Jackal? Sorry,
go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds like that you do have a core crew who kind of end up donating more money.
So actually what ended up happening, we do have people who are across the spectrum as far as finances. People actually donated money. We had a couple of people who couldn't pay the full dues for like low income tickets. And I think the 4 of us who got together and had this contract of, all right, let's cover everybody if they can't do it. Like we want them to still come. I think we each ended up paying like an extra $20 or something. So it was pretty de minimis. And, again, this is like something where we talk about the budget very closely before we make any decisions. And we try to make sure that people are on point, and our dues are pretty average overall, but we still just would not want that to be a barrier.
Yeah. And I think what you're hearing from the folks, and we tried to very carefully stock this panel with people who approach these things differently. People who use financial incentives, people who don't, to give you a range of how people approach this. I will tell you that our Camp Poople, it's about 50 people. We are a Houston camp. So the way we approach our camp is we're trying to help people from Houston get to Burning Man and back. And so as part of that, we bring a fair number of new people every year that we are meeting for the first time and enculturating them through several months. But we do have people that we don't necessarily know when they join the camp, other than the fact that we've done some vetting and that they're from Houston. And so we have historically had a deposit. And last year, our dues were $245 and a $50 deposit. And we are a camp that made the mistake of having too low of a deposit, because we found that for some people who were hot and tired and dusty, $50 just did not move the needle. So our deposit will be going up materially. But it's a learning process. And that's part of the reason that we wanted to do this panel, is to give people some actual tools that you can use to sit and think about. If you want to do something like this and add this tool to your toolbox, how do you approach it? Learn from my mistake and don't set your deposit too low. One thing that I'm seeing in chat that I want to weave into this conversation, it's how do you approach situations where you have older people or people with different abilities or people who can't maybe do the same as everybody else for whatever reason, right? Maybe they're sick, maybe they're tired, maybe something happened, maybe they have a disability. Yeah, who knows, right? Let's start maybe with you, Caveman. How do you guys approach different abilities from what you ask of people with respect to strike?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's certainly, and this is true not just of strike, but of basically all involvement in the camp, is our expectations vary with people's abilities, including their locations, right? So a large part of the camp's from San Francisco, but there's also a number from other parts of the US and some internationally. And, people who are in San Francisco, we do have some kind of work weekends where we're like doing like cooking and like or like other kinds of craft, like various kind of prep that goes on. And they're always like fun, but like, we do generally expect people who are in San Francisco, if they can, to like come and help out at those. And that's going to be more work than the people who are traveling in from other places, but like, that's what they can do. Similarly, if someone's traveling in and they're not able to help with some of that, then we'll expect them to do more potentially overbuild and strike, or more like, on shift in the camp. But then generally we just try and, we have our general expectations, and then we try and just account for everyone's individual situation. Ultimately you can't be too hard and fast with the rules, right? You have to always be understanding and accommodating. So we try and figure out what works best for the camp, and then we kind of fit around anyone's individual requirements around that.
Thank you. G Turtle, how do you guys approach differences across abilities and whatnot?
Yeah, and I did see a question just about like, and I know you mentioned what your yearly commitments are and so forth. So we don't have an operating budget to start with, but we have set costs that we let everybody know, like this is what the shared costs are and what the expectations are. So last time we were at Burning Man, which was 2019, that was just under 300 per person. This year, it'll probably be closer to 400. So that's the financial commitments, the shared commitments. As far as like different countries, so one is we try to have the discussion ahead of time, right? We know like people can only be there at certain times, and we know physical limitations for any of the heavy lifting or setup or breakdown. So we try to anticipate those ahead of time and discuss like, if you aren't able to help set up, then, maybe you're doing more on the line sweeps, on the leave no trace, and then, or the more in-depth sweep at the end of the week. they'll probably maybe they'll start breaking down some of the like decorations within the camp. If they're leaving early, and put it in a pile next to the box truck. We've done that before as well. Those are the main trade-offs. Like for the during the week commitments, well, like serving sake and everything. That's we have the one main event in the middle of the week that we require everyone to be at. Everything else is kind of loosely throughout the week when we're serving, because we're not as structured. But yeah, we've mainly had issues with who can help out with load in, set up, load out, breakdown and load out. And then if they can't help with one of those things, then where else can they contribute? And that's usually been in during the week and the line sweeps as well. But if they're not there for if they can't be participating or helping with setup or breakdown, usually they're able to do the load in and load out, right? And most of us are in Vegas, and we set out from Vegas, so that helps too as well. But yeah, it's communicating about the trade-offs ahead of time and the commitments and what everybody's can and expected to do.
Great. Whiskey Jackal, how do you guys tackle this?
We basically just have a lot of social pressure, right? It's what makes the world go around whenever we start having meetings. So, as of a couple of months ago, we just start beating home the idea that everyone needs to participate, everyone needs to be a part of this. One of the great things about my camp is, so many of the people who are part of it actually run large scale events, or have worked for Burning Man or something like that. So it's all people who actually want to participate and want to be there for the hard work as well as the fun. So really getting the right membership roster too can be, very important to having a really good camp experience out there. I mean, when you're out in the desert, you do want to be around people that you feel comfortable with, because it is a very emotional, high stakes space. And yeah, you always want to be open and have events and be willing to put your best foot out there. But, some of that is managing who actually camps with you and the type of people you're bringing to an event like this.
Mm-hmm. If I can add a few more things, because something that Cheat Circle said reminded me of this. One thing we looked at this year, One thing we looked at this year.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Cuteness break.
Yeah.
Ooh,
One thing we looked at this year, there was another camp that some of our friends had stayed at a few years ago, which had a very, very detailed point system. And they basically had almost everything that you could do, from build, strike, cooking in the week, various prep stuff, leave no tray. Everything had a point. Something's worth 1, something worth 2, something's worth 3 points, and everyone had to have 12 points of work that they signed up for, and you could kind of choose how you allocated that as long as there was space. And they had this big spreadsheet so that everyone kind of knew that it was approximately equal work across the group. We considered doing it. We didn't implement something quite that rigorous, but what we have done this year is have a much more distributed ownership. We kind of came up with an org chart, and kind of have had people volunteer to own lots of different things on Playa. Someone's the bike czar, so they're in charge of checking all the bikes and making sure they're all everything's. We've got bike repair kits. There's someone who's in charge of leading the build shifts. There's someone who's in charge of leading the strike shifts. There's someone who's responsible for managing the various cooking shifts. There's someone who's owning leave no trace. There's a whole list of all the stuff that people are owning. I'm in charge of building our shower. And so rather than kind of leaving it as in previous years to the kind of amorphous, see what happens when we all get there and unpack and leave it to the kind of wisdom of the crowds, we're trying to bring some more structure so that people have clear areas of ownership, and people feel kind of more fairness and representation. And if you're the person in charge of the shower, you're not going to just leave before it's been taken down, for example. So
points.
Yeah.
Well, and what I would say, and I'm going to weave in what my camp does on this topic as well. It's a lot of what you're hearing in situations is where you have. I just came from the ride panel before this, right? And one of the panelists was from Mobility Camp, and I will tell you, in our camp, we have an older guy, comes with us every year. He has really, really bad knees. He's had multiple surgeries, the nicest guy, but he's in really bad knees. And it's really hard for him to physically help with setup and teardown. But what he always does is he acts as our fluffer. He goes around and he's always serving drinks. He's always saying, hey, it looks like you haven't had some water. Can I get you some water? We find exactly the chat. I love that. But there are a lot of ways people contribute and can contribute that don't necessarily involve sweat. Participation is only as varied as your imagination. So that's how we handle it. We're very flexible. We're very careful to be inclusive, and our only rule is that you have to actually be doing stuff, right? You can't just sit there in the shade. And, it's like that. You drive by a construction site and there's like 6 guys supervising and 1 person who's doing the actual work. We try to avoid that situation. But flexibility, I think, is the watchword. The other thing that I'm hearing a lot of you guys say, and this is very common in my experience across Burning Man, is social pressure as sort of the lubrication that makes a lot of camps happen. And that works particularly well. And someone in chat said this, for smaller camps, because you know each other, and it's a lot easier for people to really connect. But if you remember back, the title of this breakout is Yell Less, Incentivize More. What I've found is a lot of times social pressure, when it doesn't work, it produces conflict, and you don't have anything else, and no other tools in your toolbox other than to have an argument with somebody or yell at somebody or have an uncomfortable moment with someone or give someone the death penalty by kicking them out of your camp. And that's the genesis, the origin of this discussion, is to try and give you one more tool in the toolbox. This is it's a complicated tool. It's not an easy tool where it's just this hammer works and for all nails, you can just hit it with this hammer. No, you have to really know your people. You have to really know your camp. You have to really know what motivates people. You have to be really sensitive about what people can and can't do. And money is a super touchy topic in our community. And there are people without means that you have to take care of. And there are people that are used to in their daily lives just writing checks or paying for things. I've had to have some conversations with folks say, you may be a gazillionaire, but here you got to make tacos. And so it's a conversation that a lot of times is individualized for each person in your camp. But this idea of these financial tools, we're just trying to give you one more tool in the toolbox. If you find yourself thinking, man, my camp's getting a bit bigger, or I don't necessarily feel comfortable having any kind of conflict. I'm tired of having conflict or whatever. So I just want to sort of weave that back in. I want to get some audience participation going. Well, I see a lot of questions asking about what's your financial structure, what's your budget. So how many people do we have? We have 38 people in here right now. If you're comfortable, in chat right now, just throw out what your dues or whatever your financial amount is that you ask people to contribute, and tell us how big your camp is. I find that this data is actually very hard to find out there. Again, I'll start. I have a 50-person camp, and our dues plus deposit last year was $295. I see 25 people, 200. I see 45 campers, 200, 16 at 300, 50 people with $350 dues and $150 deposit. I see 20 people, $200 going to $250. Inflation is rough. Last year, 200 dues plus 500 for RVs.
I like that. The distinction for RVs.
Right. Well, this is sort of what we're going to earlier. You're only limited by your creativity and what makes sense for your population, right? I've heard personally people argue, well, RVs take up a lot more space, right? And if I didn't bring this RV, I could have brought all these other campers. Or RVs, culturally are not what I want in the camp, so I want to incentivize them. You got to think through those things. All of
Yeah,
those.
so we looked at charging more for RVs in the past. In the end, what we've decided to do this year is actually charge generally higher dues, but get toilets for the camp and build a shower. And now basically like telling people like, we're not banning RVs, but we're saying, look, we got toilets and a shower in the camp, like get a shift pod if you need, but we really don't need RVs.
Well, I will tell you, looking at chat, I'm seeing a lot of $200 to $300 dues. Now, for the first time ever, to my knowledge, Placement asked in the post-ply report, if you remember, what's your dues, right? So Placement has that data. I have personally crunched that data. I know the answer, and I'm working very hard to convince the powers that be for us to release that to you. So generally what people are charging. And I will tell you, some people charge a number that boggles the mind, right? The number, you just kind of takes your breath away. And then a lot of people charge nothing. And some people charge nothing and just eat it and just say, this is what I do. I take a chunk of my salary every year and I dedicate it to these people. And then, everything in between. So I would like to weave a couple people in here who charge deposits. So if you have a deposit structure, if you would, and you don't mind explaining this to us or telling us about it, if you could raise your hand using the reaction, and I'd love to open up your mic and see if we can't hear you describe it. Do we have any volunteers of anyone who wants to explain how their deposit works? So I see Gerflash. So I'm going to unmute you. I'm asking you to unmute. I think I may have to change my security sessions so that you can unmute yourself. And so I'm going to bring you in as a spotlight. And Gerflash, if you could please tell us a little bit about your deposit structure.
Okay, first is Chair Flash.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. I'm one of the founders of the camp, and so there's four of us, and for the longest number of years, I've been every year since 2005. Okay, so this is like my 19th year, and it includes some stuff that we came when during COVID, and that was fine. After COVID, I caught COVID.
Oh,
okay?
no.
So that's another story. So, but for the last, I'd say 6 or 7 years, we've had that $200 dues, but we've had our four founders that have not had to pay that things because we were founders, and we have a lot of the infrastructure built at our expense and that kind of thing. And I said, I don't know if we're supposed to continue this or if that's enough, So I said, I volunteer. Let's start up again. As I said, I'm like 82. I'm gonna be 83, and I've also got no cartilage in one knee, and so things are getting like a little bit old,
Right.
But and I still do what I can, and I do a lot. And I built an art car for the camp. We're after we're like the Beatles, Pepperland is like Sergeant Pepper, and
Sure.
so I built the Yellow Submarine last year, and that was pretty much out of my pocket, and so that's just what I do. Okay, I'm very much into the culture, but I said, I think it's time we started paying.
Yeah.
And
what do you think that deposit maybe would look like?
Well, we've never done that kind of thing, and I'm thinking about it. And most people stay for the whole thing. We have had some people who left right in the middle because there was so much wind and dust and crap, and they can't take it. And in fact, we've had people a few years back when it started windy. After one day, they said, "Nope, no good. lady from LA, she took off. I think that was before deposits or before, the dues. But that's another story. But that's pretty much, and I don't know about this. For the most part, we've got a very fine, as I mentioned, I think on an earlier comment, we do communal dinners.
Mm-hmm.
And we have volunteer teams.
Sure.
They come together and they say, we're gonna take Wednesday, we're gonna take Monday, we'll take whatever for evenings. And it helps, it really helps to build community in our camp. So there's been a lot of cooperation, the kind of thing. At the general session, the idea of unmooping everything every morning is a pretty damn good idea, I think. And
Yeah.
I think we started inculcating that into the culture of our camp. It would really be nice. We're always very careful at the end, but I think doing it every day just for 15 minutes would sure help. I'm not sure we're going to need that kind of an extra requirement.
Well, let me ask you, one of the things that I would urge you to do as you guys sit around with your leadership and decide if you're going to do that is take those those bubbles that we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
and think about each one. I mean, one thing that I heard you say is that not everyone in your camp is sort of treated the same. Now there's reasons for that, and you have founders, and those are really reasonable things to think through. But I would suggest that that's one way you guys should think about it, is maybe, is there something that you can do for everyone? And you have a clear need. How do you fill it? Thank you for telling us a little bit about your stuff. I saw another hand. I think it's No Pants. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself if I can find you, you disappeared on me. If you still want to talk, go ahead and put your hand back up. If there's anyone else that wants to tell us there she is again. Ask you to unmute. And I'm going to add you. Tell us about your deposit.
So I was the one that commented way earlier that I've actually been stuck on Playa Wednesday after the burn.
Oh, no.
Which is literal hellscape. And so like having an empty Playa and just white out every single minute until all the way out to the highway was nightmarish. And so that's actually, that's what precipitated my camp back then and my current camp to actually institute a bond.
A bond, okay.
Yeah, so it's the commitment bond, right? So outside of dues, which allows us to actually build a camp and provide all of our gifts to Playa, we actually have that commitment bond, right? And it's not just for strike; it's for making sure that all of our workshops get staffed, all of our events are taken care of, and people do planning and take care of the kitchen and do mooping, like all of the things, right? And so kind of like a point system, but not quite as laid out as a point system. But and we also we actually put together quite a bit of tools outside of that bond, as all of the panelists that have mentioned, and thank you for the framework of the 7 elements that's necessary for this discussion. Like I specifically want to talk about this specific discussion, right? About financial incentives or disincentives, whatever the case may be. So outside of the bond, the commitment bond, we beefed up our acculturation, which is the really big thing, right? That I think is the theme that's going across everyone, is like make sure that everyone understands what that social contract is. But we also instituted a formal contract, that memorandum of understanding. People actually have to sign saying, here's the things that we're asking you to do to join our camp. Are you willing to do that to come into it? And so those are the 3 things those are the 3 tools that we've actually set up so that we're not there until Tuesday or Wednesday after the burn. We tried to leave with Exodus now. I actually do like staying until about Tuesday morning to avoid Exodus. That's a totally different story. But so the struggle is trying to find that financial equity for people, right? Or income equity for people, because 200, like when I first started going to Burning Man, $200 was a lot for me. I make considerably a lot more money now. That's nothing for me now, right? But we do scholarships and things, and so like I understand that it varies. Like $200 means a lot to people, and $200 is just a drop in the bucket. But what we found is actually putting a price on it, along with that social contract, not social, the formal contract says, hey, this is actually a very important thing. Participation is important. And we're putting our wallet where our mouths are, right? And so even if it's, even if it's nothing to you, like all of a sudden you're just like, wait, that's a line item? Like I actually have to pay for that? All right, that's the thing I've got to think about. Oh, this is important to camp, right? And so it emphasizes that bit. I don't think our main motivation for actually doing that now is actually to provide rewards for the people to stay all the way through, because I think we've actually handled that. But I think it's to maintain that emphasis on that your contributions to camp are important. And that's why, like outside of the dues, which help us put the camp together and put camp amenities together, like there's also commitment here, right?
Yes.
And so, and to fill that all the way through is part of that commitment. It's not just, yep, I've signed up, I paid my dues, and I can leave at any time, right? No.
Yeah.
Like there's an entire like timeline that you have to actually meet.
And you're making, I think, a great point that the panelists also made is that, you got to look at this as a portfolio of incentives, financial and non-financial. You got to think about how you train people. You got to G Turtle was talking about matching people up with folks. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox, of which the financial stuff is just one. So thank you very much, No Pants, for sharing with us. And I want to bring our chat mod into the mix now. And I'm going to go ahead and add a spotlight for her. D-Rex, do we have some questions? We have about 15 minutes left. Do we have some questions in the chat that we could ask the panel to answer? You're muted, by the way.
Yes, we do have a couple questions. I want to start with the first one is pointing out about discrimination and inequity. Somebody said, for some people, $200 is nothing. To others, everything. How do you deal with income inequity? And the other person says, do you think that additional cost of a deposit further discriminates against low-income people?
Yes. Well, we talked a little bit about this earlier with respect to physical elements. I would argue, from my perspective, for our camp, we do this. We treat financial differences the same way. We're very careful to understand everyone's unique circumstances, and we'll tune those numbers as we need to, so that we're not excluding anyone. But I want to throw that open to the panel and see, how do you guys, to the degree that you're asking for money, how do you think about people that maybe those numbers are too high?
Yeah, we again, we'll always be flexible based on people's individual situations. There are certain people who've have camped with us for years and who always contribute a lot from like an art and creativity perspective in various other ways, but don't have the financial means. And often we've either given them a discount or just given them a place for free in the camp. Again, never saying if you'll do it for free if you do X, Y, Z, but just because it's always been based on this understanding that they always contribute a lot and they don't have the financial means to do it. And so we just tried to be very, very flexible on that. Similarly, we have, in the past, if someone's kind of joined, if we've ended up having some dropouts and had some space in the camp last minute, and there are people who can join, but who haven't, done a lot of the contribution up to that point, sometimes we will charge more for them to come in. And we have charged more, especially if they're coming in late with an RV and things like that. We said, fine, but you've got to contribute more. So we've tried to kind of balance the budget a little bit that way. I wanted to just note one other thing, which we have done historically, and I think a lot of camps do, and it doesn't always get discussed that much, is that for a lot of camps, there does end up being a core crew of people who end up contributing a lot more money. And for years, we always kind of kept our dues reasonably low for what we were providing. There was always certain people who were contributing more, and not that those people were like, gazillionaires, as you mentioned earlier, and just like throwing money, but just they were very invested and just always wanted to make sure the camp had what it needed, and we're often there and build and maybe going to Home Depot and buying stuff and just not expensing it back to the camp. There was always this stuff kind of adding up and adding up. And this year we kind of had a camp discussion, and we talked about this and decided to increase the dues more than we kind of almost felt. It felt a little uncomfortable, but we wanted to make more quality, and we kind of pointed out all the different ways that there's kind of different various core crews that end up spending way over in previous years. And there was a general feeling like we wanted to make sure it was spread out more equally among people. But again, we'll always be kind of understanding of anyone's individual situation if they can't afford it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Whiskey Jackal, G Turtle, anything you want to add? You're muted, Whiskey Jackal. There you go.
Sorry about that. I guess I keep muting myself when I cough. I'm trying not to blow out everyone's ears. I'm on the tail
Appreciate
end
it.
getting better. Yeah, basically with any of these kind of structures, we just don't want people to feel left out. We know what our maximum budget is, and the people who kind of get together at the top, we own the infrastructure. We're starting to look at, do we want to set up a 501c3 to actually own things? So we're pretty, we're still in our infant stage as a camp in a lot of ways, right? But so that being said, we just try to make sure that everyone who is part of the camp is participating. They have to be coming to meetings. They have to be involved on Playa. Otherwise, we wouldn't allow them to camp with us again. We really want to have the right people out there, and we do want to keep bringing new people to the event, and we will just want to make sure it's the right one. So I'm just going to keep towing that line that I'm towing about making sure that you're getting the right folks involved. And obviously, as you become a bigger camp, that scalability, it changes, and you do have to formalize a lot of the structures. And that's something to definitely think about, is any way you can kind of just like incentivize things, build like a group experience around something, set expectations, and create, any sort of contracts or other incentives for people to just kind of like build up. Like, even if you set your camp dues higher than your budget, so you can kind of go back, and if people do need financial assistance, if you have some sort of a form for it. If you're a larger camp, I definitely try and formalize that process and have some sort of application, so this isn't just kind of a willy-nilly kind of thing.
Yeah, and I want to take this opportunity to remind folks that Burning Man has a program, the low income ticket program for people who are ticket aid program, I think it's called now, for people who can get a discounted ticket. You provide some means analysis, you fill out a budget, you give them a W-2, things of that nature. And we use that as a proxy in our camp so that we don't even have to get into people's finances. If you are on a ticket out of that program, then that's good enough for us. We understand that you're someone who we need to be thoughtful about with your dues and your deposit. One other thing I want to mention, I can't resist. You mentioned 501c3. I see a comment about nonprofits in the chat. Just want to remind everyone that we did a breakout last year that you can find on YouTube and the Burning Man channel on 501c3s and what's great about that and how easy they are to set up. I'm a huge fan. I have one for my camp, and we definitely want to help you do that if you want to do that. D-Rex, if you can put camp support at burningman.org in chat, that's a great way we can get you some help in doing that. D-Rex, do we have another question?
Yeah, before I go into more questions, somebody was asking if you had a good budget Google Sheet or a similar that they would mind sharing, or also a link to the contract that you guys were talking about.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask G Turtle for his contract if he's willing to provide it. And I'm going to ask some other people as well. If you're comfortable doing that, please mail those in to, and D-Rex, if you can put this in a chat, campsupport@burningman.org. Whether you have a contract to supply or you need a contract that you'd like to look at And I will go in to those emails and try and put something together after the symposium. Give me a week or two. We've been working our butts off on the symposium. I need a little break, but I will definitely get to those quickly. And so it's campsupport@burningman.org. And I don't see that in chat yet, so I'm going to type that in there. Camp support@burningman.org. Other questions, D-Rex?
Yeah, I think with the same theme, somebody said, give me 1 second. Okay, I'll be paying 200 dues this year in my camp. Might this relate to one's age? As my 19th year on playa, and I am now 82 years old.
Well, and I'll take that one first from my camp. Age is just a number, right? I'm getting older. I'm not that old yet. I hope to be someday. But we look more at what you can do. We've got some extremely spry 70 and 80-year-old folks in our camp. We've got some very non-spry 20 and 30-year-old folks in our camp. We've got folks of different means at those different ages as well. And so we more try and tie it to specific performance versus something that's just age related. As I mentioned earlier, we have someone in our camp who is still pretty young, who's got bad knees. And that's more what we focus on rather than just age as a number. So panelists, any other comments there? Anything that you guys do? Fair
Nothing
enough.
for age.
Next question, D-Rex?
Yes, I really like this question because I see it a lot on not only here but social media. Somebody asked, do you founders get any privileges?
That's an interesting question. And the first thing I want to say is, remember, one of our 7 bubbles was this idea of trying to use your incentives so that they apply to as many people as possible. And so that would sort of fly in the face of that. We talked a little bit about that with one of our folks that spoke earlier. But panelists, do you guys do anything different for founders or VIPs, or is there special treatment for any of those folks? Why and what is the treatment?
We have the privilege of being the final arbitrator of how to resolve something, how to deal with something. We can be very it's our responsibility to be decisive when necessary, but yeah, nothing other than you. I'm the one person that has to decide when a new set of sake gets put out into the ice chest. But yeah, there's no privileges for us.
Yeah, 0 privileges other than the privilege of working more. And if there was a financial privilege, it would be a negative one because of the added money. Yeah.
I would say that's pretty common. The servant leadership model, where your hardest working person a lot of times is your founder, and that person leads from the front. And that person is out there and set up and tear down. They're working hard. Whiskey Jack, I didn't want to step on you. Or there's something that you wanted to add?
No, nothing. Just have to echo those sentiments. People put in more work as a founder, but we don't treat them any differently.
Great. D-Rex, I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, so
Pick a good one.
Okay, that's hard. I'm gonna just somebody asked for the $200-$300 budget. Do you have any meals included in the fee? And somebody added, I will add whether you include water and shower.
Yeah, I'll take that one first. For our camp, we have kind of an a la carte approach to things. So we have add-ons that you can participate in. One of our big add-ons is transport. We have to go 4,000 miles, 2,000 each way from Houston to BRC and back. And we have some people who want to drive themselves, and they don't need any help. And we have some people that want to fly and take the burner bus, and they need to put some stuff on the truck. And so we separate that out. But in general, the way our camp approaches things is a lot of things that are sort of basic, like water or shade. Those are just included. Now, you heard, I think a little bit earlier, some people talking about maybe charging a little bit differently for RVs. Some people have a meal plan that you can participate in. I've heard different things. I think that's up to you and your camp and the particulars of how you like to do things. Obviously trying to avoid participation, right? Substituting money for effort. But panelists, how do you guys approach, let's call it add-ons for your camp?
So I think we're on the more expensive side, seeing stuff being posted around here. Historically, it's been in the 600 range, and this year it's going to be in the 800 range. But that includes all water. We get in a big communal water thing. It includes all food. So we have one big communal meal every single day, and it's all cooked by people on Playa, but a lot of prep and a lot of like snacks and stuff are in there in the kitchen, and people often kind of ad hoc go and cook breakfast or make lunches for people. It includes the thousands of coconuts that we have to buy and transport and bring in. And it includes gray water. We build a shower, and it also includes some generators so that people in tents and shift pods and stuff can have electricity, and swamp coolers, small ACs, things like that. So it's reasonably kind of all inclusive.
Final word, G Turtle, Whiskey. You guys want to add anything about your add-ons?
We don't really use add-ons. We basically bare bones it out there as far as trailers, rentals, things like that. We are going to try to get a consolidated kitchen this year if we've got room in our budget, but we don't really do anything too fancy on Playa.
Great.
Yeah, we keep it simple. The infrastructure is there. There's a kitchen that people can share. I mean, it's very basic. There's some stove burners. People can, but people also have to clean up. But yeah, our costs are we have the combined trucks. So last time we had a pickup truck and then a box truck that everybody shared in the cost, as well as the gas for those two vehicles. And the gas for the generator throughout the week. We provide the generator. So generators for lights for first part of the night, and then for people to charge their stuff. And then the sake, that's shared by everyone. And that is it. With ice there's no real formal, but everyone has to contribute on the ice, at least for the sake stuff. And the storage, and that's the other part of the cost is we split the cost for storage for the last year. That we're not going to charge them for the last 5 years since the last time we've been to Burning Man, because that was quite a bit. But yeah.
Well, thank you guys. That's our time. There are two things in chat. One is a feedback form. We'd love to hear what you thought of this. How we can make it better. We really do take those seriously. I personally look at every bit of feedback that everybody provides, and we'll try and make this better next year. So please, please, please fill that out. The other thing I put in there is the Discord link. I see some hands out there. David, you've got your hand up. There's a Discord link right there. That's this Burner Network Discord that we've created. Get on there with us. I'll be on there. Let's talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. We'll go into this topic more. If you want to talk about nonprofits, other financial stuff, or anything else, it's fair game, and that's what it's there for. Let's get into it. But I want to thank our panelists, Caveman, G Turtle, Whiskey Jackal. I want to thank our chat mod, D-Rex. You guys are fantastic, and thanks to everybody for a great symposium. We're going to wrap it up there. I've taken off the security settings. So if you want to open up your mic and say goodbye to everybody, we want to say thank you. A recording of this will be up. Camp support at burningman.org if you want slides or any of the material. But thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good burn.